So a brief history of why we got into GD&T, and then it would be easy for you to understand what GD&T is. In most of you are from mechanical engineering background, and you would have learned in your engineering topic, that is manufacturing technology, that the manufacturing was there about 300 years back itself. Then what was they following? How the manufacturing industry was before 300 years, and what are the developments that had happened? That is very important to understand. So before 200, 300 years back, manufacturing was a cottage industry. There was no concept of mass production. There was no industries. It was a individual home business sort of a thing, where an individual person would take an order from the customer. He will study the requirements, uh, prepare a concept, discuss the concept with the customer, and if the customer agrees, then he will start manufacturing, do the assembly. Everything will be done by a single person. At the time of manufacturing and assembly, if he feels that there is something wrong, then he will try to rework the part and then fit it. That is why it is written as a cut and try or file and fit. It was a very old, tedious process. This was a quality process, because of which it was very slow, laborious. As a result, it was very, very expensive also. Slowly, people were not ready to wait for the product to get ready after a long time. So we wanted a process by which we can do manufacturing faster. That is how the assembly lines and other manufacturing process improvements came into existence. Slowly, from this concept of cut and try, file and fit, we slowly got into a new concept called as artisans to machinists. So here what we had some sophisticated conventional machines by which we could manufacture, and then we started manufacturing the parts. When we started using these conventional machines, the manufacturing was not a cottage industry. What happened? There was a different person who took the requirement, then there was a different person who did the design, and then the machinist would machine as per the drawing and then assemble it and supply to the customer. So it was a teamwork. Previously, it was a one-man show. Later on, it became a teamwork where so many people with a different expertise came into role, and then they started manufacturing the parts. At that time, when a designer has to design and then communicate his requirements to manufacturing, how was he communicating? That process is called coordinated dimensioning system. In the beginning of industrial revolution, the drawings were with this particular system called coordinate dimensioning system. What is this coordinated dimensioning system? A dimensioning style in which all the dimensions are having plus or minus tolerance. You see, all the diameter, length, the thickness, everything is given in the form of plus or minus tolerance. This was the way the designer was communicating to the manufacturer in olden days. But after manufacturing, we may end up with a part like this. So here we have dimensions. So we measure the parts. The dimension what we get would be within the drawing limits specified in the drawing. But the shape is like this. Then this was not suitable for assembly. So people wanted a better system wherein the communication happens properly. So slowly from this coordinate dimensioning system, people started using another system wherein they started writing a detailed literature telling that I want this part like this, where the face should be flat, the hole should be cylindrical, and it should be concentric with this hole. Like this, a detailed description was given. But this method improved the quality, but it had its own drawbacks. What was the drawback? It occupies a lot of space in the drawing sheet, and it requires a lot of time to write a detailed literature like this. And finally, the people who are going to manufacture should read this drawing and then understand the literature, which is very difficult. So there was a requirement of a simple method of communicating, and that is how we got into a system which is called as GD&T. In this, if you see, along with this plus or minus tolerances, additional informations are given. This additional information will give the details of how the designer wants the part to be manufactured, so that it is produced as per the functional requirement. So a small comparison between coordinate dimensioning system and GD&T. In coordinated dimensioning system, we always end up with a square or a rectangular tolerance zone. Whereas when we use GD&T, we will get a circular tolerance zone. The cost of manufacturing will be high when we follow coordinate dimensioning system, and we will end up with fixed size tolerance zone. Whereas when we use GD&T, we get manufacturing cost reduced, and we'll get a lot of flexibility in manufacturing tolerances. In case of coordinated dimensioning, since we are not clear of the requirement, the inspection methods would be more. That with the same results we will not get when different people inspect the same part. Whereas in case of GD&T, same part with the different inspectors inspecting the part, we have given a clear-cut instruction of how we are going to inspect it. So there is no ambiguity at all. Since we have different inspection results, sometimes we may accept a rejected part, or we may reject the acceptable part also when we follow coordinate tolerancing system. But that dispute is not at all there in GD&T, because we have given a very clear instruction that if this part is as per the drawing, then it is acceptable, otherwise it is not acceptable. So what is GD&T? It is an international language that is used on engineering drawings to accurately describe the size, form, orientation, and location of part features. So when you give only plus or minus tolerances to a drawing, it can control only the size. It cannot control the shape. If you want to control the shape also, then it is necessary for us to give GD&T, which can control the shapes. In shapes, we have different category, which is called form, orientation, and location, which can be easily controlled. Since GD&T is expressed using line drawings, symbols, and Arabic numericals, people everywhere can easily read, write, and understand it regardless of their native tongue. As I said, if you use a literature, then language will come into picture, and it is very difficult for everyone to understand that particular language. So here, since we are going to use a lot of symbols, it is very easy for us to train people, make them understand, irrespective of what is their native language. Now, GD&T is being considered as an international language. So for language, one of the most essential and important thing is grammar. So if we don't use in a language with grammar, then people may not understand it properly. Similarly, GD&T being the language, we require grammar so that everyone understands in the same way of how we wanted. So to tell that, we have a standard guidelines which is called as ASME Y14.5. Now, when we shifted from coordinated dimensioning system to GD&T, in America there was a standard body organization which is called as ANSA, American National Standard Institution. They had a committee, a group of people who formulated the system of how to use GD&T somewhere in 1960s. They gave the standard number Y14.5. Those days, if you remember, if you ask your elders, in about 40-50 years back, in engineering, we had only two main streams of engineering fields, that is civil engineering and mechanical engineering. So a standard body called ANSI was sufficient to cater to both the engineering fields. But later on, when the engineering field started expanding, it became necessary and essential for a separate standard body for different engineering fields. And that is how America had a new organization which is called as ASME, American Society of Mechanical Engineers. This organization is responsible for giving all the standard guidelines for anything related to mechanical engineers. So what these people did is they took all the standards relevant to mechanical engineers from ANSI, and then they started maintaining the records, and they did started doing some improvisation. So in 1994, they did some improvisation, and then they released this Y14.5 standards of using GD&T. Now here this Y14.5, how did we get this Y14.5 is quite interesting. There is a myth in the industry telling that there are 14 symbols and 5 categories. That is how we got 14.5. Whenever we ask this question on what is this 14.5 means in GD&T, the very first answer what we get is 14 symbols, 5 categories. But that is not the actual reason. It's a myth. Coincidentally, we had 14 symbols and 5 categories. The actual reason of this 14.5 is in ASME standards, anything related to mechanical engineering design, the standard number will always start with Y14. Under that, coincidentally, for GD&T, zero point 0.5 was the number given. That is how we got Y14.5. Those days, there were two standards, one for inch basis system and one for metric system. So to identify what is the standard that we have to follow, M was added telling that this standard is in accordance with metric. So this 1994 standard is the one which was very popularly used in the industries. Later on, this GD&T standard had to improve based upon the manufacturing processes and advancement in the manufacturing processes and technologies. So they did the improvisation and then they released the revised version in 2009. When they released the version in 2009, they removed that M and then made a common standard for both inch basis system and metric system. Again, there was some improvements possible. So all those possible improvements were done and the revised standard was released in uh, 2019, but the standard number is 2018. So the latest standard that we have in the market today in accordance with ASME is Y14.5 2018, which was released in February 2019. Now, this ASME being an American body, many countries did not want to follow this. So those countries joined together and then they formed an organization which is called as International Organization of Standards, ISO. Under ISO, the people took this GD&T standard and then they did some modification to suit to their members, and then they released the GD&T standards in ISO, which is called as GPS, Geometrical Product Specification, and under ISO the standard number is 1101. So as I told you, the ASME is nothing but American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Y14.5 is the standard number given for GD&T. 2009 or 2018 or the year in which it was published. And when it comes to ISO, we call it as GPS, Geometrical Product Specification. So here, this GD&T is a set of a few symbols. We call these symbols as geometric characteristic symbols. There are totally 14 geometric characteristic symbols. And these 14 geometric characteristic symbols are classified into 5 categories based upon the type of application that we have. That's how the people started correlating it as 14 symbols and 5 categories, 14.5. But unfortunately, in the latest version, that is Y14.5 2018 version, 2 symbols are being deleted. So now in GD&T we have only 12 symbols and 5 categories, but the standard number is still Y14.5 only. When we started our career about 20 years back, if at all there was any question related to GD&T, then the question would be, what are the 14 symbols of GD&T? That's all. Just we have to list only those 14 symbols and we are done with it. But today, because of a lot of requirements from the customers, during the interview, there would be a lot of questions related to GD&T. if you are opting for a GD, if you are opting for a design role in any of the company, there could be different topics on which you would be tested. It could be on your CAD tool. You may have a model test. You can have a written exam on your technical aptitude. It can be reasoning skills, and then it can be interview on technical skills. Like this, different topics would be asked. In those topics, one of the topics is GD&T. So if you are going to attend a design interview in any of the ITS company, definitely you will be asked with few questions related to GD&T. And the beauty is, if you do not answer the questions properly for the domain topic, that means you are going for an interview for plastics design and you do not know much about plastics, but you know about CAD and GD&T and you answer most of the questions related to CAD and GD&T, you have a better possibility than a person who knows about plastics but he does not know about GD&T. So more weightage would be given to people with GD&T knowledge. That is how it is very important. So nowadays people started knowing about this and then they started learning this topic in a detailed manner. So here now in this next few minutes, I'm just going to give you an overview of what are those 14 symbols, how they are being classified, why they are being classified like this, so that you will get a brief idea about this particular topic, GD&T. So whenever we talk about these symbols, there are two possibilities. One is you can start from extreme right. That is directly you can go to these symbols and then list those symbols. Or you can start from left. You just go into the applications, understand the applications, and then based on the applications, how they are categorized. Based upon the categories, what are the characteristic symbols that we have. So if you go from left to right, it becomes easier for you to understand the importance of GD&T and the concept of GD&T would be much more clear. Now, based upon the application, we can classify the parts into two categories. First one is called individual feature. The second one is called related feature. So if you want to understand the difference between individual feature and the related feature, then we will take an example of manufacturing a rectangular block. If you want to manufacture a rectangular block, the very first step would be to take a raw material. So if you are from a mechanical engineering background and since you have done some workshops in your engineering, you would have definitely seen how a raw material blank would be. It will be a grayish scale surface which will not be accurate. So we take that blank and then place it onto the machine bed and then start machining one of the face. Now the very first face that we machine does not depend upon the neighboring surfaces. All the neighboring surfaces are not accurate. They are having gray scales or brown scales. It is in the raw material stages, which is not important for the first surface to be machined. So such surfaces which does not take the dependency of its neighboring surfaces are called individual features. After machining the very first surface, what we do, we reverse the surface. We place the machined surface onto the machine bed and then start machining the other surfaces. Now what is happening? The second surface what we are going to machine is taking the reference of the first machined surface. So it is creating a relationship with the existing accurate surface. So such surfaces which is dependent upon the neighboring surfaces are called related features. There are a few category of parts which can act as individual features or which can act as individual features. That is how you see three categories. So one category is individual feature, the second category is related feature, the third category is individual or related features. Under individual feature, what we have is called form controls. We are going to control the form of that particular individual surface, independent surface. Under form controls, we have four types: straightness, flatness, circularity, and cylindricity. When it comes to related features, the relationship with the neighboring part can be of three types. One is it could be related to angle, then we call it as orientation control. Under orientation control, we have angularity, perpendicularity, and parallelism. The second relationship is it could be that location of some surface with reference to some surfaces. So if that is a requirement, then under location we have position, concentricity, and symmetry. Then third category is called runout. It could be a combination of the previous cases. And under runout we have circular runout and total runout. The third category, which is individual or related features, or under which we have something called as profiles. These profiles are usually for 3D contours. Under profile, we have profile of a line and profile of a surface. So three main categories under which we have five subcategories. For these five subcategories would have different characteristics based on which we have this 14 symbols. If you are following ASME Y14.5 1994 standard or 2009 standard, or if you are following ISO GPS 1101, then you will have 14 symbols. If you are following ASME Y14.5 2018 standards, then these two symbols are deleted, that is concentricity and symmetry is deleted. We have only 12 symbols now. These are the basic requirements, but to get more flexibility during manufacturing and assembly, along with these symbols, we can use a few more symbols. These few more symbols are called as modifier symbols. There is a very big list of modifier symbols in the standard. I have just put it in the table over here. Depending upon the application, we have to use the combination of these symbols with the geometric characteristic symbols to get more advantage and flexibility. Now I said there are two categories of surfaces. Individual surface which does not depend upon any of the neighboring surfaces. The second one is related feature, that is surface which always takes a dependency with the neighboring surfaces. Based on whether it is individual surface or a related feature, another thing what we have to do is sorry, we have to decide whether the what is the type of the surface that on which we have to control. You take any application in this world, the application would end up with any of these three type of parts. The first part is called axis symmetric part. What is axis symmetric part? You have an axis line. From there you have an object line. You rotate this line for 360 degrees, you are going to get the same shape. So such parts are called axis symmetric part. The second type of parts are called prismatic part, where you have lot of planar surfaces. All these planar surfaces, what you see here. So this type of parts are called prismatic parts. Third type of part is called as 3D contour. So the third category will not fall into any of these first two categories. It would be an interpolation of linear and circular movements. So this top surface, what you find here is an example of 3D contour. So based on whether the surface is an individual surface or a related surface, and based on type of part, we have to choose one of those 14 symbols and then start applying. So briefly, I will explain those 14 symbols now. The very first symbol, what you saw is called straightness control, which was under form controls, nothing but individual features. So whenever you take an axis symmetric part, and that axis symmetric part is having a straight line surface on it, and if you want to control that straight surface, then we have to use straightness control on surface. So this is an example of axis symmetric part with cylindrical surface. On this view, we see a straight line. So my intention is to control this a straight line. Why should we control straight line? That is also very important. You take any manufacturing process, the any manufacturing machines that are available today, they are not capable of producing the part to the perfect size and shape. For example, here instead of writing 10.5, we have written 10.5 plus or minus zero point 0.1. Why? I cannot maintain exactly to 10.5. So as a designer, we have to allow some deviation, telling that the part after manufacturing can measure 10.4 to 10.6. Similarly, after manufacturing, the part cannot have a perfect straight shape. There will be some error. So what is the maximum allowable straightness error? That is what is being controlled by this straightness control. So this first type is called straightness control onto a surface, where I am interested in controlling the surface of the part and not the axis of the part. After manufacturing, we will have the surface deviation like this. When we take the peak to valley, high point to low point, the height difference should not be more than the value that is specified in the feature control frame. If this condition is satisfied, then the surface of that part is considered to be straight. Okay. So in this case, if you see only the surface is having the error, the axis is straight. Some cases, the axis can have a bend. So if we want to control the axis bend, then we can apply straightness to the axis. This is how we have to apply. I will not go in detail into why we have to give like this, what is the meaning, because we are running short of time. So when we take this straightness with the diameter symbol, then we are controlling the axis of this shaft to be straight. So after manufacturing, we may end up with a part like this. So what can happen? The bend of the axis should not be more than the value that is specified in the feature control frame. In this example, it is 0.04. So straightness here, we saw two applications. One is applying it to a surface. The second one is applying it to a axis. Similarly, we can apply straightness to a prismatic part also. These two examples for axis symmetric part. We can have prismatic part also. So when we apply straightness to a prismatic part, then it would be a two-dimensional entity. Only in one plane we can control. That is the disadvantage. So if you want to control the straightness in both the direction on a prismatic part, then instead of using straightness, we can straight away go to the better tolerance, which is called as flatness. So here we see an example of flatness control applied to a surface. So this is an example of prismatic part. Flatness can be applied only to prismatic part. We cannot apply this to axisymmetric part and 3D contours. Wherever we have a planar surface, in all such applications, we can use flatness. Okay, one point what I forgot to tell here is whenever you want to use the GD&T symbols, we use this particular block which is called as feature control frame. This feature control frame will be divided into number of compartments. Whenever we use a feature control frame for a form control, then it will have only two compartments. The first compartment for geometrical tolerance symbol and characteristic symbol, and the second compartment for geometrical tolerance value. Okay, so here, since we are using form controls, it is having only two compartments. Now this flatness is also a form control, because of which this feature control frame is having only two compartments. The first compartment we use the flatness symbol, second compartment we use the geometrical tolerance value, flatness value. Whenever we give flatness, after manufacturing, the part can take any of this shape. So here this surface is not flat. So what is the error? That error should not be more than the value that is specified in the feature control frame. Similarly, here the error is like this. It is not flat. So what is the maximum error allowed? It is not more than 0.2, or we may end up with a surface like this also. So here, the high point to low point height difference should not be more than the value that is specified. So all these are examples of controlling the flatness. Here, if you see the dimensions and the values are different, here the interpretation is whenever we give flatness to a surface, then we have to do three-step verification. That means checking should be made in three steps. First step is we have to check the part, and the size of the part must be within the drawing limits. The size should not be more than 10.6 or less than 10.2. That is what is shown here. That is the first step. Second step is the part has to enter into the boundary of maximum material condition. So this is a terminology where when the part is produced at its maximum limit, we call it as maximum material condition. When the part is produced at its least limit, then we call it as least material condition. So whenever we apply any of the form controls to the surface, then the part has to enter into a maximum material condition boundary. Third step verification is, as I said, the peak to valley difference. In this case, this is the peak to valley difference. In this case, this is the peak, this is the valley. This height difference should not be more than 0.2. In this case, this is the peak, this is the valley. So this height difference should not be more than 0.2. So if these three conditions are satisfied, then we tell that the surface is flat enough.